In July 2024, the United States arrested Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the co-founder of the Sinaloa Cartel in Texas. American authorities called it a direct strike against one of the most powerful criminal networks in Mexico. Within weeks, disappearances in the Sinaloa region began to rise. By September, a full internal power struggle had broken out inside the cartel, and homicides in the state climbed from 44 in August to 142 in September. This video will examine what that sequence of events reveals about a strategic approach Mexico has relied on for nearly 20 years, who is driving it, what it has produced in measurable terms, and what changes or does not depending on how the next phase unfolds. Mexico's war on drugs was formally declared in December 2006 by President Felipe Calderón, a conservative politician who deployed 6,500 troops and police officers to his home state of Michoacán within weeks of taking office. At the height of that campaign, approximately 96,000 troops were on active duty against cartel violence, drug trafficking, and related crimes. The central tactic Calderón institutionalized was what analysts call the Kingpin Strategy, the targeted removal of cartel leadership through arrest or elimination. The logic was that decapitating an organization would cause it to collapse. The results were more complicated. Bernardo León Olea, a former security commissioner in Morelia, Michoacán, has argued that removing a cartel leader does not dismantle the organization below it. Extortion continues, drug sales continue, local corruption continues. What changes is the internal power structure, and as factions compete to fill the vacancy at the top, violence increases. That pattern has repeated across 4 successive Mexican administrations spanning nearly 2 decades. When President Andrés Manuel López Obrador took office in 2018, he initially moved toward a de-escalation posture, described publicly as a hugs not bullets approach. Over his 6-year term, however, the military's role expanded considerably into immigration enforcement, port oversight, and infrastructure, even as López Obrador largely avoided direct operations against major cartel leadership. Laura Atuesta, an economist who led the drug policy program at the Center for Research and Teaching in Economics, noted that this restraint was a deliberate political choice, not a structural reform of the underlying conditions that allowed cartels to operate. Mexico's current president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has returned more explicitly to direct operations. That shift is partly internal, but it is also shaped by sustained external pressure from the United States. President Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened unilateral action if Mexico does not aggressively confront its cartels, including hints at military operations on Mexican soil. He has already imposed steep tariffs on Mexican exports. In March 2026, Trump stated publicly that the United States would do whatever was necessary to defend its national security, naming cartel violence in Mexico as the epicenter of the threat. In response, Sheinbaum's government extradited nearly 100 suspected cartel members to the United States beginning in 2025. In February 2026, the Mexican military killed Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. The immediate aftermath followed a now familiar pattern. At least 70 people were killed in the initial wave of retaliatory violence. More than 250 roadblocks were erected across the country. Violence spread across roughly 20 states. León Olea described the dynamic plainly. External pressure from the United States forces the Mexican government to produce visible results, and high-profile operations serve that function, regardless of their measurable impact on civilian security. The situation in Sinaloa since July 2024 provides the clearest current data on what follows the removal of leadership. Maria Isabel Cruz and her colleagues at Sabuesos Guerreras, a collective that searches for missing people in Culiacán, have documented an estimated 5,800 disappearances since Zambada's arrest, a figure they acknowledge is likely an undercount. In 2025, 1,657 people were killed in Sinaloa. Local businesses have closed. School classes have been canceled due to active shootouts. Residents have adopted self-imposed curfews. The conflict has expanded into neighboring states, including Sonora and Durango. Cruz, whose own son disappeared in 2017, has noted that the cartels are now targeting an increasingly wide demographic range, with children as young as 12 being forcibly recruited. The violence has also produced a measurable shift in femicide rates. In Sinaloa, femicides rose from 31 in 2024 to 73 in 2025, an increase of 135% in a single year. Sonia Frias, a researcher at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, has explained that criminal organizations use femicides and disappearances as instruments of territorial control. As organizations fragment after losing a leader, the successor factions tend to be more violent and more operationally diversified, including into human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Frias has also noted that femicides connected to criminal networks are frequently undercounted because killings of women suspected of cartel association are not consistently classified as gender-based crimes. Consider two paths from the current moment. If Mexico continues operating primarily through the Kingpin Strategy, without structural investment in municipal policing, judicial capacity, and local economic development, the pattern visible in Sinaloa since 2024 is the likely default: a period of fragmentation, increased violence, and civilian displacement each time a major leader is removed, followed by gradual consolidation under new leadership, followed by the next operation. Atuista has pointed out that the U.S. illicit drug market, estimated at nearly $150 billion in annual consumption as of a 2016 study, remains the primary financial engine of the cartels. As long as that market functions, weakening one criminal group creates a vacancy that competing groups will fill. The second path requires something the Kingpin Strategy does not provide on its own. Leon Olea has argued that without well-resourced and professionally trained municipal police forces, no combination of National Guard, Army, or Navy deployments produces durable change, because the origin of the problem is local and so must be its resolution. Atuista has made a parallel argument about education and economic access in cartel-controlled territories. Without those, populations remain structurally available for cartel recruitment. What to watch is specific. The JNGC's internal transition following El Mencho's death in February 2026 will determine whether the pattern of post-leadership fragmentation produces another surge comparable to what followed Zambada's arrest. The trajectory of femicide rates in Sinaloa through the remainder of 2026 will indicate whether civilian harm is deepening. And the degree to which Sheinbaum's government moves beyond extraditions and military operations toward institutional investment will signal whether the strategic calculus is actually changing or whether external pressure is simply producing a faster version of the same cycle.